Decorate for the holidays. You might not think there's enough time, yet with a little sewing savvy and supersized quilt blocks, you can add drama to your home with a minimal time investment. Create an easy Dresden wall quilt or tabletopper with Clover's Trace and Create templates, the Dresden collection. Quilting has never been easier or faster. This wall quilt or tabletopper is fast to make since only 5 blocks are needed. The supersized center block, it's 36 inches, and 4 12-inch traditional blocks at each corner. Please select 5 fabric prints that coordinate. You'll find the yardages for this project at nancyzieman.tv.com. We've chosen for our sample, it's just a slightly different color variation, all in the Christmas theme. The 2 templates that are used to create this great project are wedge shape and circle shape. They're from Clover, the Trace and Create quilt templates, the Dresden style wedge, and then the center applique for the Dresden plate. You can create 6 sizes of blocks from 12-inch to 40-inch, traditional to supersized. We're using a combination of both for this project. After choosing the 5 fabrics for the Dresden plate, you're going to cut crosswise strips from each fabric. For the large center, the 14 1/4 is the crosswise strip, and I have 5 14 1/4 strips cut. And then for the smaller sections, you're going to be cutting 5 1/4 inch strips. And you can see the strips cut in that area. After cutting the strips, you're going to trace the shapes. Let's start with the center, the supersized. I'm going to be working with a 36-inch block, and it's going to have an 8 1/2 inch center. This is all die cut, so you align this at the edge of the fabric, along the top and along the lower edge, and then use chalk or a marking pen and trace along the side. You'll need 4 wedges of each color. Rotate, align the top at 36 inches, the bottom at 8 1/2, and trace. And continue until all 4 have been traced. Cut out using your rotary cutter and a ruler, and of course I'm working on a mat. So just align the edges and cut. You'll have accurate wedges cut. So there'll be a total of 20 wedges of the large size, 4 of each color, and then for the smaller sizes you'll need 16 wedges because we're making 4 blocks. After the cutting has been complete, now it's time to do the sewing. I have my Baby Localissimo set for a 1/4 of an inch seam. I've attached the patchwork foot that has a guide on the side, giving me a perfect 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. To sew the top of the wedges, fold each wedge in half, right sides together at the wide end, meeting the cut edges. Place the fabric starting at the cut edges underneath the presser foot and along the guide and stitch. Find your next wedge, do the same thing. Fold it in half, right sides meeting, starting at the cut edge, and stitch. Just chain stitch all of the wedges together. You'll have quite a few to sew for both the large and the smaller wedges. After chain stitching all the layers together, you'll have a chain of wedges clip apart between them. And then the first step that I like to do is a finger press. Just press that open and then turn right side out. You can use a turner to assist in getting the sharp point. It's very important that the seam is right in the center of the edge of the wedge, and to assure that, I've simply used an index card, marked a line down the center for a 45-degree angle. Then you can do a quick press. Insert the card inside the wedge and align the seam and the wedge together. Doesn't get easier than that. And then press the sides. You'll do this to all of the wedge shapes. Then stack the wedges so that you're going to be meeting pairs of colors together. Start pinning at the top area. This is the first place you're going to sew. We're going to chain stitch these together much in the same way as we initially chain stitched the tops of the wedges. Start sewing at the top of the wedge at the folded edge and sew. And I like to sew with a little shorter stitch length because you're sewing right at the fold. maybe at a 2.0, perhaps 2.5. Then after stitching one pair, regardless of the size, just butt up the next pair right along the guide and stitch. You get the idea. You just chain stitch and chain stitch. Then after creating the pairs, press open the seam allowances. Then so that you have 5 wedges together, creating a quarter of the Dresden plate. And I'll show you how this looks at the table. This step shows that I've stitched one of each wedge together, creating 4 quarters of the 12-inch Dresden plate. Now you can stitch the quarters together to create a circle. Your applique is starting to take shape. The center of the design also has options. Notice that the template offers 3 sizes, 4.5, 6.5, and 8.5 inch widths. Choose the largest circle for the focal point, that's the 8.5 inch circle, and the 6.5 inch circles for the corner. Regardless of the size, the circle applique is made in the same way. Cut some squares of fabric, just a little bit larger than the circle size you're going to create. Also cut a layer of fusible interfacing, meet the fabrics right side together so that the fusible is on the outside. Place the template on top of the fabric, and I'm going to be tracing the 6.5 inch circle. Use a marking pen or chalk and trace within the die cut areas. You're going to stitch along the cutting areas. You're not going to be cutting along this line. It's a lot easier to sew a circle without the very circled edge. I stitched around the circle on this shape. You can see the stitching more readily on the interfacing side, and then do some trimming. And I like to use a pinking blade placed in my rotary cutter for fast trimming. There's one more trimming step, and that's to trim the interfacing. Leave a generous 1-inch seam allowance within the inside, remove that center section, and turn right side out so that you're turning the interfacing to the wrong side. And because the fusible now is against the wrong side of the fabric, simply press. You can take a little time to do the pressing, which I have done on this circle. Here's the 6.5 inch circle for one of the small blocks, and the larger 8.5 inch circle, all made in the same fast way. To position the applique in the fabric, cut the background square, and you'll cut it 36.5 inches. I'll tell you that on the instructions. And I've press marked it, folded it in half once more, so that I have equal quadrants on the background fabric. Then after press marking it, we'll work with the large center circle. Place this on your fabric. That press mark gives you perfect guides of where to place the seams so that it's centered right in the fabric. It takes a little time just to get it centered, but you'll be assured that you'll have equidistance of fabric all around the edges. Now to position the circle, you're going to use the same technique, but this time press the circle. Press the circle in half, press it in half again, and I have pin marks at each quarter mark. Place the pin marks again, matching it to the seams of the plate. Pin into place, and now you're ready to do the stitching. I'm back at my sewing machine, and now it's time to applique the Dresden plate and the circle to the background fabric. I've attached the J foot to my machine and selected stitch number I-35. It's a quilting applique stitch, but I'd like to adjust the stitch just a little bit. I'd like to lengthen it to about 2 to 2.5, and then the width, make the width to 2.5. You can see how it changes. The important part is to depress the icon for the pivot control. That's going to make stitching the hills and valleys of the Dresden so much easier. I've detached the foot control from my machine. I'm going to control the stitching with the stop and start button. First, I'm going to sink the needle right next to the fold of the fabric. I'm going to stitch next to the fabric, and then as I stitch, I'll just start stitching, and the zigzag goes into the wedge, and the straight stitch stitches along the edge of the fabric. As I reach the point, I'll stop the fabric. We'll stitch one more stitch so it goes off the edge. There we go. Notice how the needle sinks into the fabric, the presser foot automatically raises. Pivot, lower the presser foot, and start to sew. That way you have your hands free to turn the fabric because you're working with the pivot technique. It's really a fun feature of the Alissimo to work with. Finish the project by using your favorite layering, quilting, and binding techniques. You can see that you can decorate for the holidays with ease. I hope you've enjoyed learning how to create an easy Dresden Holiday Wall Quilt. To learn more about my favorite sewing machines and to see the products used in this video, visit your participating Baby Lock retailer. Tell them Nancy sent you.